right at the very end of the server upgrade for the airport. City Hall has completed everything, and so we are at the point now where we are building what we need to do to make the airport up to date to connect to that infrastructure. So we've got GIS and everything else available to us out at the airport. We are another part of that is also the beginning of a security system. We're going to be putting in security cameras at the terminal building and a couple other locations, with the end goal of making the terminal building available to pilots 24 hours a day. So if you are a general aviation pilot coming in and you're landing at 10 o'clock and need to use the restroom, you will be able to call ahead, get a code, come in through the door, and then the security cameras will keep the building safe and secure, but will also give our customers and transient aircraft ability to come in and use the facilities after hours. Okay. So we are moving towards that, and this is just the first step in that. Other than that, unless you guys have any specific questions, it was a pretty standard month. And then there is two cases. There is a separate claim, obviously, for 2 cases of oil, 20 W50 for $150. And is this 2 loads of Jet A, Linda?
Just
1 load of Jet A for $15,511.97.
Okay, any questions about the claims?
No, looks pretty standard to me. Okay, I make a motion to accept the claims as presented, especially the oil and the fuel.
And I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the claims, especially the oil purchase and also the $15,669.97 for Accent Aviation Group. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so moved. And we now have our president, so he can take over.
Yeah, sorry. Wednesday I got stuck by the train.
You can use firefighters too.
Not gonna lose that because I just had to walk. I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay, we've approved minutes and claims, I assume?
Yep, we're through
Yep.
that.
Okay, we've done all the claims. Next is engineers report.
Alrighty.
Mary, fire it up.
The exciting part, thank you for joining us. Okay, so for an AEP update, we finally made some headway with AEP, and the past 3 weeks we've met, I say met, we've talked on the phone with them weekly. So we are trying to finalize an in-person meeting at their office in Fort Wayne in the next couple weeks. I know that Nick has said that he would attend that meeting. I wanted to see if anyone from the board would like to attend. I know that we will have to, we'll be discussing at that meeting getting under contract with AEP. I would assume that that contract would be between the board and AEP and not the city and AEP, but through the board is normally how I've seen it, but I would be open to discussion if people had other.
Is there any particular value to have somebody from the board there? I mean, if, I would make time if it had some value to it, but I'm not going to add a lot to the process.
Yeah, I think what they, and I think that Nick could honestly handle it. Their quote was that we want to make sure that the person with the purse strings is there. So I think Nick can handle that personally, but I wanted to make that offer to the board and let you know that was their request.
Anybody can go if they want to. I probably won't under those circumstances.
When is this meeting?
We have a call with them tomorrow to try to determine a date, but we're looking at in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We don't have any.
I know I'm gonna be gone for at least 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get a firm date in place and a date and time, I can call you 3 and let you know when that is, and if
Okay.
you would like to,
And
we can
if we
figure it
can,
out, and if not,
we'll
I'll
go.
go.
That'd be fine, yeah.
Okay. Great. And then what else? With AP, we did kind of coordinate with them, that the estimates and the engineering and material survey and everything would most likely, be occurring, this summer or early fall. So, once we get that contract in place, that work can, begin with them. So essentially they will finalize their design and they'll start ordering materials, and they anticipate starting construction in early spring of 2021, which
So
is.
this is a misprint.
The report says starting in spring 2020.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It's 2021. So that is what we've been coordinating with the FAA on, and they are on board with that schedule too, so. We also have submitted the official Part 7 surface model to AEP. I know that we previously had found out that they were only working off of the 7,000, I think we discussed this last month, the 7,000 foot runway instead of the 7,500 foot runway. So those surfaces have been updated, and they have that information now. So they did have some buffers in there, so there were not any major issues with their model, but it is good that they have the most recent information, and that they know that we will eventually be going to 7,500 feet. So I've also just been on the phone with we've been on the phone with FAA. We had a call with them last week, and I've been in contact with them today as well. They want to get that contract between the airport and AEP signed as quickly as possible. So that's really our goal with that meeting, as I said. And they're wanting to start construction spring of 2021. So I think they actually said April 2021. So we are on par with the FAA's schedule. And I do note that your current program manager, Dolores Small, I don't know if anyone has met Delora here, but she is moving to California with the FAA, so you will now have a new ADO manager at the end of the month. So.
Do we anticipate that will make a difference for us? Sorry.
Victor is new to the FAA. I think there will be a learning curve with him. Thankfully, we do have a relationship with Rob Baskerville. He's been on these calls that we've been having with the FAA, and he was prior to Delora, he was one of your previous program managers. So I would anticipate him being involved while Victor is getting up to speed on everything.
Okay.
So we have started scheduling bi-weekly meetings with the FAA to keep them up to date on everything. So Rob is invited to all of those meetings. When we had it, was it last Thursday?
Yep.
He was on the call, so.
Because I saw, I'm on that email list, so I got the email from her, and first I was, oh, not another.
Yeah.
Not another start over.
Yeah,
So,
That's exactly what it is.
and we don't want to accept that.
yeah.
Okay.
I personally do not know Victor because he has not been with the FAA prior to this, so.
But he is a PE.
Yes, so he does have engineering experience, so I personally, I've only spoken to him on the phone twice now, so I can't really give you more than that, but I think it is good that we still have Rob that will be involved with everything, and he has the prior knowledge and history with the airport, so.
Okay.
And I have Dolores' cell phone number, so there's always that too.
Same here. I told her I'd call if we had questions.
Yeah, well, if we have problems.
Yeah.
It's gonna keep going at the same speed, and it doesn't matter whether they hire somebody else. I'm not interested in that as a reason anymore.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that, with FAA, I spoke with Delora today, and one thing that AEP is wanting is to try to eliminate as many obstruction lights on the structures as possible. So currently the FAA says that those lights are recommended. we are coordinating with them to understand exactly which structures are required to have those lights and which they just recommend having lights on, so just to get further information from them. It seems like AEP would be very happy if we could try to eliminate some of those lights by lowering these structures. I think that we will most likely still have to have lights on some of them, especially the ones that are pretty close to runway center line. But for some that are a little bit on the outer edges, possibly we could eliminate those, but we're coordinating with FAA on that now, so.
We are gonna go with the newer LED type lights for those replacements instead of using the old technology?
On the towers?
Yeah.
So we're talking about the high-tension towers, and we
Right.
are studying if we even need lights out there.
Right, I know. I'm
If-
saying
If we do,
if
they
we
would
need-
most likely be new LED lights. But that would come from FAA as to what lights they require. Right now, the size of structure out there requires a bulb on top and then a bulb at 50% of the height of the tower. The new towers will be below that surface where they would only need a bulb on top. And since the towers are going to dip down, go across, and then come back up, what is being looked at, if towers outside of the dip need lights, what would a pilot unfamiliar with the airport think if they came in and saw 2 lights on towers on left and right side and only 1 light on a tower directly in front of them? So will we need to put a second set of lights on those, or do all the towers only need that top light then? Because what the FAA and the airport, what we don't want is a pilot to think that a light is out and that they need to stay higher to clear over that obstruction when you don't know if it's there or not,
That
if you're
makes sense,
unfamiliar.
yes.
So that is what is being studied right now, and until the FAA airspace group gets back to us with that, we're just kind of waiting. But Delora did just send an email today that they are still working through that,
Yep.
if I read that right.
Okay.
So then, with 1836, NGC is still finalizing their designs. They anticipate plans being finished in April. And then CHA is coordinating with Nick on establishing a time to discuss DBE goals for that project and also for the next 3 years, so. Any questions on AEP or 1836?
Everything will be wrapped up with NGC.
When the design is complete.
You believe that's being worked on with all appropriate
Yep,
speed and attention?
yep.
Okay.
He said it would be done by the end of April.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Nick?
So I will do fuel usage and income statement reports, and then I do have a walk-in that I will explain here in a minute. You guys should have a picture for that there as well. As you guys can see from fuel usage report, we sold roughly half of what we sold last year in February. Part of that is things are just going slower this year. There are not as many flights at Warsaw or anywhere. The other big portion of that was the 6 days in February that we had the most flights scheduled in and out were, of course, the 6 days that we had all of the freezing rain, slush, snow, and everything else. And we were doing everything that we could to keep the runway open. We were able to get a lot of our smaller traffic in and out. But the heavy jets that were wanting to operate out of Warsaw, that runway length was not there for them to safely operate, so they wound up diverting to Fort Wayne. So off the top of my head, I know of 6 flights that didn't come in February because that runway length isn't there. So if you figure 800 to 1,200 gallons per aircraft, that adds up pretty quick, and that shows right where that deficit was. So that's why it's important to get these projects going.
And that's the lack of usable runway length.
Correct.
If we actually were to use all the asphalt we had,
They would have all been there.
they would all have been there. So classic example of why we're going through all this
Yep.
project for everybody
Yep.
right now, so.
Yep. So, other than that, it was a very standard month as far as fuel usage and the income statement, unless you guys have specific questions that you would like me to go over and discuss. I will talk about the land lease and the diagram sitting in front of you.
Okay. Any questions about either of those reports?
Nope.
Okay, Nick,
All
fire away.
right. Now, I did not make press copies of the land lease. I didn't think you would really want a copy of it. If you do, I can email it to you. It's just a blanket land lease that we've been working on. The reason it wasn't in the original board pack was we were still waiting for feedback from the FAA on what they thought of the land lease. They have approved it. They said it looks great. They really like what we've done with it. And they think it'll work really well for Warsaw. So there's actually 3 different documents in here. The top document is the land lease agreement that we discussed. The board has tentatively approved this based on FAA comments and feedback. We have no comments, feedback, or changes other than well done. So if the board wants to, we can ratify this tonight, or I'm just fine with tabling it, letting you guys have 1 more month to look over it, and then we can do that at our next meeting in April, excuse me. So that is up to you guys. The other 2 documents are 2 documents that we use frequently. We've just never had the board really review them, make sure that you guys are okay with how they read. And that is the land lease option to extend. As you know, in our standard land lease, they are for 10 years with a 10-year option to extend. This is just a standard form that we fill out whenever we need it per occurrence, and everybody signs what needs to there. The other one that we have used in the past is an assignment of an airport land lease. So if one individual sells their hangar to another individual and that individual elects to assume the previous land lease, that they do have the right to do that. Most people would rather just sign a new land lease because they would get the full 20 years. There are times, whether someone passes away, a family member deeds it to another family member, you may need to do a lease assumption. It's just, again, a blanket document that we have used in the past. So it's kind of up to you guys how you would like to proceed with that.
You want to get a chance to take a look at it and then put it on the agenda for next month?
Yeah, I would prefer. Let's
Okay.
do that.
I agree, yeah. So
Okay.
I've got one question. How are we doing with Charlie Smith's building?
So when his estate had finalized, we actually, Gene, I think you were actually on vacation, but his son and daughter took ownership of that building and then assumed the lease
Okay.
that was his. So
Okay.
they have all the legal paperwork is done and they have taken possession of
Okay,
that building.
that's what, I didn't know that.
Do you remember when it's been a minute.
Did you know?
I can
I
get you the
didn't know it
date.
officially, but I kind of
Heard it.
heard through other.
Yeah,
that
Ryan and
it was
Michelle
pretty
took
well
over.
settled up last
It-
fall or something.
Yeah. So.
That's good.
The other diagram in front of you, we briefly discussed, and this is what you guys have a copy of. We briefly discussed this 2 months ago when we talked about the land lease, and it's the next part of the conversation with the land lease that the board needs to have. With the new land lease, there will be an Exhibit A attached to the land lease that describes the exact footprint of what land is being leased by that tenant. On the left, and I apologize for the crude drawing, this is just basic before we really put some heavy detail and heavy lifting into this. On the left, we currently calculate square footage from the studs in. So the tenant only leases land based on the actual footprint of their building. So I just picked hangars at random, and I showed you there that the one hangar, the orange number is what the square footage of that building is, and then what the sidewalls and then the bump out for the office are. The building due south of it is, as you see, is obviously much bigger. If the FAA looks at this, they view land used by a tenant easement included is used by that tenant and is not available to the airport to use for something else because that tenant's footprint is sitting there. And so the right one, the proposed, what the FAA recommends is that you actually go by, so the tenant to the south has 2 propane tanks. They require extra ground to keep those propane tanks away from the buildings. So they should be responsible for that land as well around their building. And per our airport layout plan, we have taxiway object-free areas. That is what those red lines entail. And we are required to keep those areas free of objects, free, you know, if somebody's pulling their aircraft out, obviously that's okay. But you can't keep parked cars there. You can't, they would not be able to go out and put trees out in front of their building, things like that. And so what the FAA recommends we do is we not only calculate that area inside of the green box, but then any space that they are using that we cannot build another hangar next to. In the proposed side, you'll see I put the taxiway object-free area on the right side. Those 3 buildings are actually, if you sit down and you do the math, if those were at the proper easement from each other, the 2 buildings on the left would fit underneath them on the right. That is how far apart they were spaced when they were originally built. Now, obviously, we're not going to go back and make people tear buildings down, and that's not what's going to happen. But moving forward, using these standards, it will allow the airport to much more effectively manage our space, manage plans for future hangar development. And I think that this puts a better responsibility on the tenant to be conscientious of how much land they are using at the airport. So I don't know if the board has any immediate comments, feedback, thoughts on that. But it is definitely something, as we move forward with this land lease, we will need to figure out how we want to define that Exhibit A. Once that is defined, then I will go through working with CHA and Mary, and we will come up with a footprint for each building at the airport. And then that footprint will be denoted Hangar 2, Hangar 3B, whatever the number is, and we will, and then that will be attached to the lease going forward.
Okay, well, let's talk about this in conjunction with the lease when we bring it up next month.
Great.
Okay?
Good.
Okay, anything else for us, Nick?
That's it.
Okay, anything else from the board? If not, we will see you at our next meeting, which is April 14th, 2020, assuming we are not all quarantined.
All right.
Oh, and for those of you looking for something to do later in the week, remember that On Golden Pond is at the Center Street Community Theater at the Wagon Wheel, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday matinee.
And you're,
And I'm going to rehearsal right now.
you are the older fella in the,
No,
Or
they
the
said
younger Paul.
there's no way I could play anybody Gene Zale's age. That's what I said. But no, I am playing the role made famous by Dabney Coleman in the movie. He was the boyfriend, the dentist / boyfriend.
okay.
Now,
And give me those dates again.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and